My name is Ray Lee, and this gentleman was the only gentleman I didn't know previously. Now I have introduced myself to him. But I know that there are a lot of new homeowners within Somerset itself, within Sierra Canyon, and throughout all of Somerset itself. So today, what I want to do is go through a presentation of the budget itself that we have planned for 2015. I also want to give you a look ahead in terms of the next couple of years, in terms of what we see in terms of the possible revenue streams that are here within Somerset, as well as the expenses themselves. So let me go to the first slide. Last year, the Strategic Planning Committee put together the vision and mission statement for the board to consider. The board did adapt that mission, the vision and mission statement. You can read that itself. Let me say this also, that this presentation we typically post online on mysomerset.com website. So this presentation will be available online as well. Also, I will be giving this presentation again next Monday at the club at Town Center. Same time, 5:45.
Must be guinea pigs, huh?
So what are the highlights for 2014? Yeah, with the new homeowner elected board, every year there's going to be an election for board members because the terms will vary or will expire year by year for certain members of the board. So every year there'll be new board members. They'll have to be integrated into the workings of the board, into the various committees that the board has. But some of the highlights, of course, we've had a new board member in 2014. His name is Chris Huff, and he's active in working on board matters. We also have negotiated, after a long period of time, the purchase of the country club land, water rights, as well as the water facilities. Tony Faconis has given a couple presentations on that. I'm not going to get into that, but from a highlight standpoint, that deal was negotiated. It's now out for a homeowner vote. The CCNRs were also changed and approved by the homeowners. That happened, I guess September, was it September, August, late September, early September of this year. A strategic planning consultant has been hired. We actually have hired, I guess it's a combination firm out of Truckee to help us plan for the future in terms of our capacities, as well as what the needs of the community are. So we expect that first strategic planning report will come back to the board sometime in the early part of next year. The finance committees has been engaged in a lot of activities. They've looked at the landscaping contract, and later on you'll see that the landscaping contract is one of our largest contracts within Somerset. It runs approximately $800,000 per year, plus whatever spending we might have in terms of reserve for landscaping items. The board has also, not the board, but the finance committee has also looked at the management contract that we have with First Service. They've made some recommendations in terms of what to consider in the next contract going forward, but they've also looked at that. And they've looked at various other contracts in terms of what the other major contracts within Somerset itself. The communication committee has made several presentations in terms of the survey, the homeowner survey that was conducted at the end of last year. So they've been trying to broadcast out what the results of that survey was. And the AGC committee has revised their guidelines, and we've also reduced the costs. Those are just implemented just this month. So what is the Somersett Owners Association? First of all, you have the board of directors themselves, and you see the 5 board members there. 3 of us, our terms were up at the end of this year. That is Tony Vaconis, Curtis Chan, and myself. Our terms were up this year. So if we want to continue on the board, we have to file for our candidacy for re-election. But within the, let's say, the management structure of Somersett itself, we have various committees that have been set up. I've talked about a few of them in terms of the highlights for 2014, but each committee generally has a board member that is also a member of that particular committee itself, one or more. And you can see, I'll talk about the responsibilities of the committees on the next couple slides, but you can see that the committees can't function just with board members only. We rely on the volunteers throughout the community. And we have more than 20 different volunteers from throughout the community that serve on various committees. Now, I'm sure that, well, I know that people have transitioned in and out of these committees throughout the year. I hope I've captured the current committee members correctly at this point in time, but we certainly need to thank all of the volunteers that have served on the various committees throughout the course of the year and served really throughout the past 2 years that the homeowner elected board has decided to set up these committees. Okay. So what are some of the responsibilities of the committee? And I'm sure I haven't captured all of the elements here, but just a highlight in terms of what these committees do. These first 4 committees are basically, I'm going to call them open committees. That is, usually the meetings are conducted where any homeowner is invited to attend these meetings. They can listen in on the deliberations in the committee, find out what's happening in each one of the individual committees themselves. Okay. So the next set of committees, these 3 committees, the community standards, the aesthetic guidelines, and the executive committees, I'm going to call them, they're basically closed committees, except when the committees invite homeowners to come into the committees to discuss their specific item, or the homeowner wants to come in and present an issue to the committee themselves. But within the Community Standards Committee, we have homeowners, we have board members as well as several homeowners that participate in that in terms of enforcement of community standards. The Aesthetic Guidelines Committee is mostly made up of professionals. They're paid professionals. We don't pay them a whole lot, but we need the expertise in terms of, there's a professional engineer on the committee, an architect on the committee, a landscape architect on the committee, a landscaper themselves on the committee, and then 2 homeowners on the committee. The current homeowners on the committee are myself as one of the board members and Curtis Chan, another homeowner elected board. We don't have the expertise that those other individuals have, but we certainly have a feel for the process and understand perhaps a little bit better what homeowners are going through when they submit requests into the aesthetic guidelines. The executive committee is made up of the board members themselves. We hold actually monthly meetings, and there are certain things within NRS that we basically, our duties that we perform within those executive committee meetings. And you can see the list of there. The management staff, the community management staff. Their pictures, who they are, you can see who they are, you can identify. Most of the time they're down at the Club and Town Center. Lauren Summer, I guess you can't really see the pictures all that well, is actually out on her honeymoon this week. She's been out since the middle of last week, and I think she's going to come back next week sometime. So she's not here today. Otherwise, normally she would be here. We have Christina in the back here with us, as well as Stephanie helping out to set up tonight's presentation. But some of the other people involved, Stephanie also is involved with the Community Standards Committee. She's sort of the, I'm going to call it the record keeper for the committee, sort of tries to keep us on track. Blake down below is with the, sort of the coordinator for the AGC committee, the Aesthetic Guideline Committee. Again, his duties are pretty similar. He basically interfaces with the homeowners in terms of their submittals and coordinates their presentation to the AGC committee. Okay. So before I start talking about the Somersett budget itself, I typically just look at some general data. And 89523 is our zip code. Somersett makes up about probably 25% of 89523. So the graph, the numbers here are not just Somersett numbers, but I think they're pretty indicative of the trends that we're seeing in the real estate market. Basically, inventories are low. There are not that many homes sold, but the homes that do sell, they're at higher prices. And I've talked to a couple of different real estate agents, and that seems to be true throughout Somersett. The real estate agents also tell me that Somersett is probably performing better. It's performing at one of the better levels within the region itself. So people find it desirable to live in Somersett, move into Somersett, want to live here and be part of the community. So I'm going to say several months ago, before we even started playing with the numbers, we tried to put together within the Finance Committee some budget objectives and assumptions that we're going to use for planning the 2015 budget. So this was a list of bullet points, let's say, that we put together in terms of what it is that we wanted to try and achieve in the 2015 budget. We didn't know at that particular, as I said, we had not put any pencils to the numbers. We just said, well, this is what we wanted to try and achieve. And whether or not we could achieve it or not, we didn't know until we worked through the numbers. Our budgeting process, as I said, we have a finance committee. The finance committee also acts as the budgeting committee itself. But we basically ask staff to prepare a budget from the bottom up, and then we look at it from the top down basis. I've worked with budgeting throughout most of my corporate career, and that's the way it's done for the most part in corporate USA. But you can see here that what some of those objectives were and assumptions are. We wanted to try and hold or slightly reduce the overall assessments. We know that we need to improve the reserve funding levels in TCTC. I've had people ask me what TCTC is, so I better explain. TCTC is the Club and Town Center, which is the facility down the road here, a couple miles down the road. It's the other clubhouse, let's say. We also made the assumption that, hey, the acquisition of the country club land, water rights, and water facilities would go through, and that we would be able to finance the transaction on a 100% basis. We said that the current amenities agreement with the country club would be terminated. We also said that we would be able to refinance the Canyon 9 debt as well as the TCTC debt with the developer. Now, throughout the course of 2014, we've been hearing from some of these committees that we formulated. They've been trying to submit ideas in terms of new amenities for the community. But a lot of them were too early, let's say, to fund at this particular time. These were ideas. We think that they're getting closer to actually generating ideas that we can take action on from the board standpoint, where things are truly identified in terms of what needs to be done and the cost involved in doing that, rather than just the idea itself. So we think that we need to provide funding in our 2015 budget for these so-called special projects. And as I go through the presentation, you'll see what's on the table currently, or what we've put into the budget. As some of you know, we also rent space, and we've been renting space for, I'm going to say, probably close to the past 5 years. We rent space in what's called the loft. The loft is located in the commercial buildings across from the Club and Town Center. Several years ago, we made a concerted effort to market that space as meeting space, wedding space, throughout the community in Reno. And I would say that we were successful in doing that in those initial years. But what we reached the conclusion is that lease is expiring at the end of this year. We said, we're not really in the, I'm going to say, rental, facilities rental business itself. And we really should. At that point in time, when we rented that space, we needed additional space for some of the programs that were taking place at the Club and Town Center. We actually moved some of that programming to that facility. But over the course of the year, as we've rearranged things in the Club and Town Center, we find that we probably can do without that additional space, and we'll give up that space. And we will detach ourselves. We will not market ourselves as an outside venue to other Reno events, other than internally to residents. Residents do rent the facilities at the Club and Town Center. Sometimes they rent the entire pool for a pool party. They rent the rooms for weddings. They also rent the rooms for parties that they make full. We will continue to do that, but we will not have the use of the loft to be able to accommodate it. We also wanted to maintain and enhance the amenity offerings that are here currently. And again, that really speaks to some of the things that are coming back to us from the Strategic Planning and Communications Committee. And the last bullet point, we wanted to provide some funding for landscape and water conservation projects. We've always had a line for this item in our line account budget. Sometimes we spend it, sometimes we don't. But we wanted to make a concerted effort to really do something in 2015. We've asked our landscaping companies to come up with ideas. They've submitted some things to us, but we really want to take some action. And we want to make a concerted effort to be able to do so. Now again, before getting into the details for 2015, I just bring up this graph in terms of the delinquent assessments receivable. You can see that we've gone through quite a history, and I've been around through most of this history because I first came onto the board in the latter part of 2010. But even prior to that point in time, our delinquent receivables were actually over $1 million. Now, our overall budget today is around $5 million. Back then, it was $4 million. So if you had $1 million in delinquent assessments, that means that 25% of your funding is not, you don't have the cash to do what you want to do. The expenses, the anticipated programming that you wanted to perform during the course of that year. The board has been very diligent in breaking down these assessments receivable. You can see where it is today as of August 2014. So every year we've been able to bring that down to a more manageable level. So this $255,000, roughly 5% of our total revenue stream, that $5 million is in delinquent receivables. We've written off some of that. Anything over 90 days where the homeowner association does not have a priority lien, we basically have written that off. And that's most of this difference between the $94,000, which is the net assessment receivable, and the $255,000, is the write-off of those over 9 months of delinquent receivables. Okay. So from a financial standpoint, the picture has really changed over the past several years. I jumped ahead to the assessments now. But let me go back to the cash. Where's the cash position? Back here in 2010, roughly $100,000 in cash at the end of the year. And I can tell you that there was over $400,000 that was due to that the reserve fund was due, that was not transferred at the end of 2010. Because frankly, there was just not enough cash to make that transfer. So as we worked the delinquent assessments down, we were able to, in effect, fund the reserves to the levels that were recommended by our reserve consultant. So you can see the change in our cash balance. Today, at the end of August, we have $1.2 million in the bank in our operating cash fund. We also have $3.7 million in the bank in our reserve fund. I'm going to tell you that I think our operating cash balance will actually be down around, roughly around $800,000 at the end of the year. There's a couple things going on. The board, at its November 3rd meeting, will consider an additional transfer of $100,000 from the operating cash into the TCTC reserve. TCTC is currently running a favorable variance to budget. So we are considering making an additional transfer to improve the reserve situation in TCTC. As some of you may be aware, we're also considering purchasing a lot down at the next to the commercial building at the Club Town Center. The price of that lot is probably going to be around $300,000. So that's why I tell you that I think the operating cash amount will be roughly around $800,000 at the end of this year, with $300,000 spent to purchase a lot and $100,000 additional transfer to the reserve account to improve our reserve situation. Now, I'll show you a slide in terms of what the reserve funding level is in each one of our cost centers. Talking about cost centers, we actually have 4 main cost centers within Somersett. We have what's called Common Area and Canyon 9. We also have the Club at Town Center. We have active gate areas. We also have inactive gate areas. I'm just going to ignore inactive gates. There's only 3 homes in the inactive gates today, so it's really inconsequential. There you can see the history in terms of what our assessment rates have been in each one of these individual cost centers. Depending on where you live within Somersett, if you live within Sierra Canyon, you only pay the Common Area Canyon 9 assessment. If you live in the other parts of Somersett, it's A plus B. If you live within the gated areas, it's A plus C, inactive gates, etc. This is what you see from Somersett. Now, because I live in Sierra Canyon, and I think everyone else in this audience lives in Sierra Canyon, we pay not only the common assessment rate, but we also pay a separate rate to Sierra Canyon. The people in the villages and the View also do the same thing, because they're sub-associations of the master, and the master being the Somersett Owners Association. So from this slide, you can tell where I'm headed. I like to show you the end result, then I'll talk about some of the details. But what we're looking at today, and it's up to the board to approve the budget, and then it's up to the owners to ratify the budget in December. But the board will consider the budget for 2015 at its November meeting. And then the owners will need to ratify the budget in its December annual meeting. But right now, what we're looking at is a reduction in the common area assessments of $3 per unit. And I talk in terms of per unit, because each unit is not necessarily a home. It could be a vacant lot, it could be builder lots. So like Pulte's building down here, they may have sold some of those lots to individuals, but they still probably have in inventory, I'm going to say 10 to 20 different lots that they also are obligated to pay assessments on. So they have a right to vote on those 15 to 20 lots that they own, just like any other builder, any other homeowner has a right to vote. But as I said, what we've, in looking at the budget for 2015, we think that we're able to reduce the common area assessments by $3 per unit, but at the same time, that objective of improving the funding for TCTC, we think we need to increase the assessments there. I'm going to tell you that's not going to be just a one-time increase. This is something that we'll need to do for the next several years to catch up, or to bring the funding levels at TCTC to a better position than where they're at today.
We're not involved in TCTC.
No, not Sierra Canyon's not involved, but the rest of Somersett is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what does the budget look like? As I said, we bring in revenues of roughly $5 million a year. I noticed this, I didn't put dollar signs there, but those are dollars there. But, so we bring in roughly $5 million, or we will bring in $5 million in revenues on an annual basis. In 2014, our estimate is about $4.8 million in revenues. So what are some of the things that I've talked about that make an impact on the rates? I've talked about the transfer to reserves. That reflects those additional transfers to reserves that we anticipate in 2015. And in fact, I'm going to tell you that we're probably going to do $100,000 of this early in 2014 rather than wait till 2015. But because that action hasn't taken place yet, I just left the estimate for 14 as is. The other part is the country club amenities and the loan repayment that it would take to acquire the land, water rights, and water facilities. When we budgeted the amenities access agreement for 2014, we basically put it in at the $15 per unit rate. But during the course of the year, we've actually negotiated that rate down. And the net payment that we will make throughout 2014 is probably closer to $300,000 than the $400,000 that was budgeted. The loan itself for the $2.7 million, and I'm using a $2.7 million principal balance in the loan itself, although right now it's probably slightly below that. The loan repayment over a 15-year period at 5% is a payment of about $256,000. So just from that alone, by canceling the amenities agreement, taking on a $2.7 million loan to acquire the assets, the land, the water rights, etc. Again, we see a possibility for further reduction in our operating costs in the common area unit. And you can see our estimates in terms of units on top. We try to be conservative in our estimate of number of units. You can see that during the budgeting process, we said, well, maybe it's only, we only made the assumption that there'd be 2,545 units for budgeting purposes in 2014. Where we're going to end up the year is actually closer to 2,648 units. And that's primarily because of what's happening here within Del Webb. Pulte is just moving faster than anyone anticipated, probably faster than they've anticipated themselves. Okay. So going into 2015, we've again made some assumptions in terms of Pulte itself, building out. We don't think they're going to build out completely by the end of the year. At least that's not what we have in our assumptions. We think it's going to take them about 2 years to build out. So we basically cut that. We know what the end number is. It's going to be around 1,220 units. Or 46. I've seen both numbers. I don't know what's right or wrong, but it's within the ballpark. So we basically just said, well, half of it's going to come in 2015, the other half in 2016. And there's other places. I'll talk about that later, but we currently have 6 builders working within Somersett. It's not just Pulte Del Webb that's going strong, so to speak, but we have 5 additional builders that are going fairly strong within Somersett, or are planning to be very active in 2015. So maybe again, our number of units may be conservative again, rather than optimistic. What else? Okay.
Ray, one question.
Yes.
Why is the estimated income below the budgeted if we have more homes than we expected?
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to look it up before I came here. But I think it's the mix of where the units are coming in. Gates obviously are the highest in terms of the monthly assessments versus, let's say, the Sierra Canyon or the Pulte, which just pays them the lowest rate of assessment. But I'll look at that further, and I'll have more definitive answer at the next meeting. In terms of the cost centers themselves, the common area, obviously, everyone pays in the common, so the full 2,700 units that we anticipate for next year pay common area assessments. Within TCTC, there's approximately 1,627 units. That is the non-Sierra Sierra Canyon portion of Somerset. There's approximately 1,600 units. And then within Gates, there's 300 units on top of that. So that's how we derive the budgets, individual assessment rates for each one of the cost centers. So what are some of these special projects that we're looking at? First of all, I'm going to tell you that we try to list projects that are likely to be executed in 2015. They may not be completed in 2015, but we try to list all of the projects that will come under consideration by the board. In the common area, we have $122,000 in our budget today for these types of projects. We've actually gotten some rough cost estimates in terms of sidewalk safety improvements. We're particularly concerned about the crosswalk between TCTC and the playground across the street on Somersett Parkway. So we're thinking about putting in some blinking, where you press a button, you start blinking crosswalks. We've actually approached the city with that. They said, yes, they will support us doing that, but you've got to pay for it. So we know we're got to fund that. Trail improvements through the survey. People have said they want better signage on the trail system itself. I guess people might get lost in some, or some homeowners want people to direct it in a certain direction. We know that we want to make some improvements. We want to put into electronic format most, if not all, of our records. And I know when we transitioned from one management company to our current management company for a service, we got over 100 boxes of paper documents. I would guess we probably had put into electronic format maybe about half of that, maybe a little bit more, but there's still a ways to go, and we want to become as fully digitized as possible going forward. So if we keep track of our records on an electronic basis, we'll be able to retrieve much better than what we had. Now, and then the other things that you see here, we currently have 3 different computer systems that manage the operations throughout Somersett itself. They don't talk to each other. They're not integrated. So we know that we need to do something. We want to provide funding to do that. Whatever system integration work that needs to be done, we know needs to be shared. It can't be all common that pays for it. Because some of the things within TCTC, a new system supports the programming activities there that the rest of, let's say, Somersett doesn't participate in. We know that it's not fair just to charge everything to the common, so we've made an attempt to allocate or just share those expenses across the various cost centers. Our communications committee knows that whenever we send out emails or email blasts, that approximately 50% of it gets returned to us because of incorrect email addresses that we have on file. So we need to make a more concerted effort to keep our records accurate. We want homeowners to give us the current contact information. That's basically what I'll say. And again, we want to add water conservation projects in our special projects. So this is all in the common area cost center. Okay. So within the Club and Town Center, we have $72,000 budgeted for special projects. Now, this is in it. So we have in there people, and I'll show you some stats a little bit later on, but people have been asking for additional shade areas, expanding the swimming pool deck to accommodate more people. But I'll show you some of the stats that we are seeing today in terms of utilization of those areas that will probably justify doing something along these lines. We know the fitness room. There's been a call for fitness room expansion. The Finance Committee is actually tracked in terms of usage by hour, in terms of the number of users within the TCTC fitness room. We know when the peak periods are. And the question becomes, do we build to accommodate the peak, or do we try to find some sort of mid-ground, so to speak? We know that the lot that I've talked about, there's actually 2 lots next to the buildings, next to TCTC, commercial buildings in down the town center. One of them recently sold. We're negotiating, as I said, on the second lot, but should that other lot become available, we want to have an opportunity to perhaps bid on that as well. We're gonna look at reallocation of office.
That lot would be just for TC?
Yes, both lots could be.
Oh, both lots would be.
In my opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
No, maybe not in everybody's opinion.
In my opinion.
Sounds good to me.
Yes, me too.
Okay. We also want to look at reallocation of the office, how we utilize the office space at TCTC for staff. Maybe there's a better way to do what we're doing there. So we'll take a look at that. With the private streets and gates, we want to upgrade the lighting with regards to keypads on the coding at the various gates.
On the computerization or digitization, this has been taught, have you looked into including like Sierra Canyon and View and Town Center, and because they have similar records and there's.
I'm going to say that whatever records we have related to Sierra Canyon, the View and the villages, yeah, we want to digitize them. Do we have them all? I can't.
Well, I mean,
I can't tell you.
I consider including them in the project.
Well,
you know.
our intent is to do everything.
Right, so it's all one place, you know?
Yeah. Our intent is to do everything. As I said, I can't guarantee that we have
No, right.
everything. Okay. And this last comment down below. In our CC&Rs, when the developer set them up, he put in there a provision for capital funds. So on any transfer, any sale of any home within Somersett, including Sierra Canyon, there's a minimum amount of $400 per unit that is collected. It's collected into this capital fund. That capital fund was intended to be used on common projects to build out further amenity, etc., or to reduce the operating costs in the common area itself. To date, we've accumulated roughly $300,000 and some odd in that capital fund. It's part of that $1.2 million that I talked about previously in our operating cash. That we started letting the capital fund started its accumulation about 3 years ago. So it actually accumulates roughly $100,000 per year. That's based on the, let's say, the general economy, the home sales throughout Somersett itself. So there is that additional fund that's out there. I anticipate that part of that fund will be used to purchase that additional lot behind the Club of Town, or behind the commercial buildings at the Club of Town Center. So that's where I see that $300,000 coming out of it, basically. Plus some other arrangements that we're still talking about in terms of how that's, if those lots are strictly for TCTC, how can we get something back to Sierra Canyon?
And the village.
Yep. Okay.
But if the $300,000 is used to purchase those lots, and there's not a payback, then that becomes common area, not the Club of Town Center. And then anything that's developed on those lots becomes common area, which we would be paying the additional assessments on those. So if that's a real issue,
I'm going to say that's a
or
possibility.
concern.
A possibility. I don't know the likelihood of that occurring, but I'm going to say that's a possibility. So if funds are distributed to Sierra Canyon out of that capital fund, then Sierra Canyon would have to buy back in, so to speak, if the decision was made to put in there a common amenity. Okay. But that's down the road. Probably the next board and the next board after that, probably it won't be an issue there because frankly, we just don't have enough money to develop the lot at this particular point in
I
time.
don't think we're gonna want to come from this end of Somerset and drive down to the TCTC to use whatever the new common area is going to be.
Well, as I said before, I guess I've lived here 7 years. For the first 4 years, the only entrance back to Sierra Canyon is throughout the front entrance of Somersett.
On that capital money, shouldn't that be a separate line item in the budget rather than in the operating?
Well, it's in the, it's not in the operating budget itself.
Oh, I thought it was in the
It's in the cash balance itself.
But even in the balance sheet, shouldn't it be a separate line item?
We do track it separately.
Okay, that's right.
And our monthly graphs in terms of our cash balance, we actually show that separately, as well as homeowner prepayments, which also
Okay.
are good in that cash. So we know what I call unrestricted cash, what that amount is. Okay. I told you that we had an issue with the reserve funding levels at TCTC. I'm also going to tell you that in 2014, the Finance Committee reviewed all the reserve projects. We also, from the Finance Committee standpoint, we made recommendations to the board to spend more than what was in the reserve budget in TCTC, because some of the projects that were taking place this year. It just made sense to do the projects now rather than wait until it became due within the reserve project. Some of that had to do with the pool itself, the drainage area, the tiles around the drainage in the pool. We said it made more sense to do that project now, spend more money now, rather than spend even more money later on. Same thing in the locker room areas itself. So we actually spent about $200,000 more than what was in the reserve budget, in reserve projects at TCTC. This number was closer to 60% at the beginning of the year. We actually, if you want to say that, we took it down on purpose because there were projects that needed to be done that made sense to be done now. So you can see the funding levels in terms of reserves. We have a reserve consultant that provides us with an update every year. Every 5 years, they actually do a complete, I'm going to call it physical inventory, revise their reserve analysis. They tell us that in the common area, we have about 91% funding. In the gated areas, we have about 95% funded. And on an overall basis, we're 83% funded. On any chart that says, hey, you're probably well funded in terms of your reserve. TCTC is a different story. They have a chart of reserve consultants that says, hey, anything in the, I forget what it is, 50 to, I think it's 70% range, it's fair. So we know we need to work on improving this funding level. As I said, we have in the budget here, the presentation, we have another additional $100,000 in 2015's budget to improve our reserve funding. What does $100,000 represent? Represents approximately 7% improvement in the funding rate. So I know that we'll have to make a continual effort over the medium term to get the reserve funding levels up to the levels that Common and the gates are at currently. Okay.
Question on the gating. I know the gate areas are high because I assume that includes the roads?
Yes, it
Private
does.
road?
All the streets are private.
Does that include curbing and drainage?
I'm going to say yes, it does.
So culverts?
We've also had a lot of problems with gates, the gates
The
themselves.
gates themselves?
Yeah.
Well, I assume they're expensive, but I assume a lot of it's just for roads, for the long-term
the roads
repaving
themselves.
the roads.
When you look at the reserve analysis itself, the reserve consultant actually projects out in the future when we have to spend, I'm going to call it big bucks.
Yeah, big bucks, right.
That time frame for Somersett is probably around 8 to 10 years out, where we're gonna have to spend quite a bit of what we've been reserving for to make, because this, Somersett started around 2004. So we're approximately 10 years old right now in terms of Somersett. Come the 20-year time period, a lot of the replaceable assets that we have here will need to be replaced. That top line, I show you what the reserve consultant tells us. That's the current value of the replaceable assets in each one of the cost centers. So we have approximately $10.4 million worth of replaceable assets that we have to fund or reserve for with a 30-year horizon. Okay? So we currently have, or at the end of 2015, we project we'll have around 4.1 million. From a cash flow standpoint, that's not a problem. We're not gonna, unless there's a catastrophe, I don't see us spending $4 million. In fact, well, I see a typo here. The reserve consultant is right in terms of their standards, so to speak. They're anticipating we'll spend $529,000 in reserve projects next year. And that's broken down by specifically by what projects they're recommending. But as I said, the finance committee, the board actually looks at them on an individual basis. We make a decision, not merely based on what the reserve consultant says. We'll take into consideration. Some things we'll defer further because sometimes you don't have to do slurry seal, even though it may be, quote, reaching that particular age. We'll actually send out a professional engineer to look at the street. And if, in his opinion, that we don't need to do the seal currently, we can hold off a year or two, we'll hold off a year or two. Rather than spend the money currently. Okay. I said, one of the things we wanted to do was look ahead. Within the finance committee, we said, let's not just look at the next year forward, but let's look further ahead. So we tried to do that. You see what the history is, what we're projecting for 2015. We see a 6% increase in the number of units in 2015. We are seeing a 7% increase in the number of units in 2014. Okay. And we're trying to project out to build out. We think build out is going to be around 3,400 units here within Somersett. The PUD permits actually go up to 3,700 units. But we know that probably not all the builders are going to build up to the maximum. People change their mind when they submit their final mapping, they come in differently. I also tell you where we see development coming. I tried to put together this map here just to show you where the number of units are going to be coming in. Above the fire station, you're going to have 150 units up there. That's permitted now. Sierra Canyon down below, to complete the build out of Sierra Canyon at 1,220 units. You need another 229 units to complete the build out. And again, we have identified where we think the construction is going to be, where the build out is going to be. So as I said, I think we're going to end up around 3,400 units. Now what I didn't account for is all the individual custom homes that come off of it. There's probably at least another 50 custom lots out there. Depending on what people build, that's going to add to this probably gated community, because most of the custom lots are in the gated community areas themselves.
But aren't they paying already, a lot of those?
Some are not. Okay. But yes, depending on where they're located. Yeah, it could add to our base in terms of the assessment paying units themselves.
But if you say that some of the lots are not paying the homeowners fees, who owns the lots?
There's owners for each of the lots, they say that.
But-
It's just that they haven't triggered, each area is governed by different rules of when assessments are triggered.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
I was thinking everything was like bullies, okay, that's fine.
It's not.
Okay, thank you.
So if you take these projections in terms of when these units are coming in, and as I said, I think we're trying to be conservative. We're trying to push out the number of units out, but sometimes you can't, because when, let's say, 88 units come on board, Leonard here, they're clearing that space for 100 single-family homes right next to Sierra Canyon here. When that comes on, it comes on once they sell one home. So we've got to try and factor in all these changes in terms of assessment paying units. So when you do that, well, the other thing too, we're trying to assess the impact on our amenities. We know that right now, there's roughly 5,400 residents, 5,500 residents that have registered to use the Club of Town Center. So any, let's say, non-Sierra Canyon homeowner that wants to use the facilities of the Club of Town Center, they have to register. So we know that we've got approximately 5,500 registered residents there. The other part is when anybody, let's say a Sierra Canyon resident, wants to play the canyon out or use the canyon out, they also have to register. So we know, let's say, the total number of people that have registered. And we know that not everybody's a golfer. Not everybody uses the Club of Town Center. So some of these are approximations, let's say. But from that data, in terms of Somersett X Sierra Canyon, we think there's approximately 3.4 residents per home in the rest of Somerset. For Sierra Canyon, we use the estimate of 1.7 residents per unit. We know there's some that are more than 2 in a home. We know that there's quite a few that are just single residents in Sierra Canyon. So that's where our numbers come from in terms of the residents in Somerset. Approximately 7,000 residents within Somerset today. Based on those number of units, using those same factors, we think Somerset will end up with roughly 9,500 residents at build-out. We can do the same type of thing with the amenities, the common amenities. Today we have a common amenity. Canyon 9 is a common amenity. For whatever reason, I can't tell you, the number of rounds at Canyon 9 dropped this year, and it dropped a fair amount. You can see what the history has been, but let's assume that that's true. Just based on the number of residents and just, I'm going to say prorating it, you can see what we're projecting in terms of the number of rounds in Canyon 9. We also know that in the current amenities arrangement with the country club, last year they actually had 5,100 transactions, non-country club members, but Somerset residents that have used the facility, mostly dining is where they're, and usually when you dine, you typically don't dine by yourself, so probably this is just the number of transactions, not the people utilizing the amenities. But if you were to project that forward again, just based on the change in population in Somerset, you can come up with an estimate again. The Club of Town Center, we have 9 months worth of data today. Again, if you annualize that, you see the number of visits, unique visits that residents have made into the Club Town Center. You can also see pool usage. Yeah, pool is seasonal. But I've sort of, just used the 9-month figure. And this is where we're at, around 22,000 uses of the pool this year. Now, admittedly, probably the weather's been better this year, or warmer this year, I should say, than the past years. But we've really seen a significant jump in the usage of the Club Town Center as well as pool. But again, if you use the population data, if you believe that or those projections, you'll see what that extends out to be. So we know that from a board standpoint, we know that we need to do something in terms of enhancing the amenity offering for residents. We know that we probably will need new facilities. That's why, from a strategic standpoint, we want to purchase the lots at the Club Town Center, hold them because we don't have the money to do anything with them currently. But looking out into the future, we think we're going to need to do something before a revolution occurs. Okay, so that's why, from a strategic standpoint, those lots down in the commercial center are important to us. Okay.
It doesn't make much of a case for the golf courses though.
Well, the golf course, the transactions have actually been improving. This is the very first year that the amenities agreement
We
was
got
in
2
place.
golf courses with even projected 10,000
Yeah.
people rounds. I mean,
No.
that isn't even 50 rounds.
This is number of transactions, so
Well, I'm
usually
saying
when
it's
people
rounds.
play golf, it's not usually as a single, or they don't dine as a single either. So there's probably. So again, using 2015 assessment rates and the number of units that we projected out, you can see what the revenues project out to be, and I'll tell you, I told you what the projection basis was. Some we inflated, some we held. But basically, you can see this bottom line here. I make the statement down here. There's opportunities in future years to either fund additional special projects or perhaps reduce assessments. The further out you go with more units, obviously you have more opportunities. And this is holding the assessment rates current, at the current 2015 level, which calls for that $3 reduction in common area. It calls for a $2 increase in the TCTC assessments.
What are you using to project your expenses? Just
Right there.
standard inflation rates?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Payroll, 2.5% per
Okay,
year.
I see over there.
Okay. Yeah, the loan repayments are
Yeah.
fixed, so there's no need to inflate those. The delinquency rates, we actually are upping that delinquency rate to 1.5% beginning in 2015, just to be more conservative. Okay. So what remains in 2015's calendar? Some of the other things that are happening, as I said at the beginning, we have elections for 3 positions on the board of directors for 2015 and 16. It's a 2-year term for those candidates. Right now, candidate nights are planned for October 19th and October 21st. There's a board meeting November 3rd where the budget will be considered. That additional reserve transfer will also be considered at that board meeting itself. And there's finance committee meetings as well as strategic planning committee meetings. And the first board meeting for the new board will be December 10th, 2015. Mostly what happens there is the officers are, I don't know, appointed or determined at that particular meeting. It's an organizing meeting, basically. Okay, so those are the key dates for the remainder of the year. Last slide, this picture. There are a lot of things obviously happening within Somerset itself. And I know not everyone utilizes all the facilities. I don't utilize all the facilities here in Sierra Canyon, although I know it's available to me. That's true of most of the residents, probably more true of the residents outside of Sierra Canyon in Somerset, because most of them are working, whereas most of us tend to be retired, although we get pretty busy ourselves. But with that, on the presentation that will be posted online, I also have supplemental slides, and they'll be there for you to view as well. But in terms of the presentation, this is where I wanted to stop. So, questions, comments?
It's just your opinion, maybe. And how viable is the town center? You know, commercial buildings down
The commercial buildings?
there. What do they look like there? I mean,
They actually have two separate owners now. The developer used to own both of those buildings. They went in bankruptcy and they were sold, foreclosed. They were sold to two separate owners. One of the issues that we had with the commercial center at down there is maintenance related issues, common area maintenance. There was always a question in terms of whether or not the club at Town Center, we've always considered to be just a third of that separate, I'm going to call it homeowner association, or that common area association. The other buildings are other. We've always taken care of, I'm going to call it our portion. We've slowly sealed the parking lots, we've striped them, we've taken care of that. But the rest of that parking area it hasn't been maintained well. So
is that a commercial HOA?
yes, it is.
They have their own board? Is it active, I guess, is that?
It's not active. So that's part of the issues that we have. We don't know who to go to or can go to force some of these issues out there.
Are they still responsible to the Aspen board, or does they carry a separate set of laws for the commercial HOAs?
That I don't know whether commercial HOAs are, it's
I'm
like
sure they have
office suites.
I'm sure it's a different animal.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. So I don't know. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you for attending tonight.
Well, thank you for presenting.
I'm going to go through this again. Get the opportunity to go through this again next Monday. If you didn't get enough, you're welcome to attend next Monday at the Club at Town Center. Thank you.